जलेंगी चलेगी ना। यहाँ पे मैं कुछ नहीं करूँ ना। अरे वो चल गया था यार ये वीडियो अपना। चल गया था सर। हाँ। मैं आया क्या? हल्का तो चला था। मुझे यार किसी को लगा। चल तो रहा है लाइव है। लाइव चल रहा है। हाँ आ रहा है। ठीक है।
Is the voice audible? Are the online students able to hear me? The people who are online, you can just message or just send a hi so that we know that you're able to hear. Just will give you one minute to settle down, people who are joining in, and then we will start today's lecture. And we'll continue with what we discussed in the last lecture, right? So those who had attended the last lecture, I'll just brief what are the topics that we had done. We had started with the overall overview of the two papers, the syllabus we had seen, the important areas, and then we had also seen the 2023 paper for paper 1, both sections, right? So as we go along and as we do more previous year questions, I hope you will be able to understand these parts better, right? Then we had started our discussion with the very basics of silviculture, the definitions, okay, the differences between silvics and silviculture. In fact, for this part, I had also given a previous year question, right? That how justify the study of silvics is important for the afforestation programs, okay? So this also we had seen, and then of course we had seen how silvics is also related to the different branches of forestry. We had also seen some basic technical terms related to plants and forests, which will be useful in the coming lectures. Then while discussing forest, we had also seen the definitions surrounding the forest, okay, the champion and sate classification, And this we had also ended then overall with certain previous year questions, and we had also seen overall the classification of forests. So there were around 8 parameters on which we had classified the forest. So this was the overall overview, okay, and then in the end I had shared certain previous year questions with you. So those of you who have started late or perhaps only had very limited time, so okay, you can go through yesterday's lecture and today's lecture, paper 1 for lecture 1 and lecture 2, and after that you can try to attempt. Okay, you will have the whole weekend with you, Saturday and Sunday, because from Monday onwards we'll again start in more detail, right? And in these 2 lectures I'm also giving you the overall the overview related to forestry optional. Okay, the pace is also slightly slow because again we know that many of you are seeing this optional for the very first time. But after the few introductory classes, then we'll put and go in full pace. Fine. So we'll start overall. There are a few things that I just want to again repeat and overall emphasize, and then we can discuss this, right? Now, here we have already the people who are not aware, the Forestry Optional Crash Course. These 2 are the orientation lectures which are available free on YouTube. We also have a forestry test series which starts from the 12th of October. The Forestry Optional Crash Course is going to cover the entire Forestry Optional in 40 days. And those of you who, let's say, want to also get the access to the foundation course, that is also available. You can contact the team, visit our website, or you can also contact on this number. Additionally, if anybody is writing the Indian Forest Services Mains of 2024, we have also, Sunya IAS has also created a Telegram group for mentorship and guidance, which is again free of cost. So you can again message or text on this number to gain access to that group, which is for exclusively for the people who are writing the Indian Forest Services Mains of 2024. Okay. These were the questions we had seen, I had given you yesterday. Justify the study of silvics, that is essential for successful afforestation programs in India. Defines a silviculture, relate the applications of silviculture to different branches of forestry. Okay. Give the legal definition of forests in India and write about the major forest types in India. Okay. And the last one being the forests have a moderating impact. Okay. Again, the people who are giving the exam or perhaps who just want to again write and have any basic thoughts, you can just write this. I'd also shared this on the Telegram channel. Okay. You can write it and again send on this same number if you want any evaluation how to write, or perhaps if you just want an assessment of how well you've written. Fine. Now, again we are going back to our paper 1 section A, right? We had started with silviculture general and we had basically built the base. Okay, in the very first lecture there were some things that we had done. Yesterday we had also seen this classification, okay, of forests based on age, okay, based on method of regeneration, based on growing stock. Now in the coming lectures and specifically in mensuration in paper 2A, we will see the growing stock can be normal, the growing stock can also be abnormal. Okay. Talking of ownership, this also we had seen. So basically you have the government ownership, you can also have the private ownership. However, we can also have the community ownership and also the ownership at the level of panchayats. Okay. Now when I say community ownership, think about conservation reserve and community reserve. So while conservation reserve is on the land which is owned by the government, community reserve is totally owned by the community. Okay. So there is a basis to the conservation and the community reserves. That also is something that we know, which again derives its overall from the Wildlife Protection Act of 1972. Talking of the legal status, this also we had seen, right? One was the Godavarman judgment, then other was the Forest Conservation Act, right? Then, for example, if you again see, if we see the Indian State of Forest report, okay, you will see that there is a different classification that is done based on the canopy, okay? And yesterday also we had seen the different crown sizes, okay? So here the forests are divided in 5 segments. You have very dense forest, moderately dense forest, open forest, scrub forest and non-forest. Okay, so the lands with the tree canopy density of 70% or above, these are known as very dense forest. Okay, Whereas the lands with tree canopy density of 40% but less than 70%. Okay, so again greater than 40 but less than 70%, this is moderately dense forest. Again, from 10% to less than 40% is your open forest, and then with less than 10% is going to be scrub forest. So these are these forest lands. However, some things which the thing which is not included in any of this, it is going to be known as the non-forest. Okay, so I hope till here you'll be able to follow and basically know, right? So this is also a basic, let's say, part that we generally read about and generally we understand. Okay, so that is also one. I hope the people who are online are able to see this and able to overall comprehend what we are saying. Fine. Okay, so now moving to the next part here and the next aspect. This is again what we have done. Okay, the PPT also will be shared with the students, so don't worry about some of the text, let's say, that you are not able to totally write down. Just focus on what we are saying. The examples or the dictation which I give you, that should be written in your notes. Apart from that, you can overall just okay, understand the lecture. Right, now the same thing that we see, for example, the trend of how the forest cover is increasing, and this is again a part we'll also do in paper 1B and in paper 2B. Okay, in paper 1B again, when we talk about joint forest management, the national forest policy, and we see the national forest policy of 1988 in more detail in paper 2B. Then we'll see overall the target that was set way back in the initial national forest policy was that we had to have 1/3 of the forest cover. Okay, which means 33%. If we go by the most recent Indian State of Forest Report 2021, again published by the Forest Survey of India, published every 2 years, we have not yet had the Forest 2023 report. So you have to know that the forest and tree cover as of now is 24.62. The trend is increasing. If you see the figures here, the trend is overall increasing: 21.23, 21.34, 21.54 and 21.67. Okay, this is overall increasing, but still we are not yet close to the 30.3% target that was set in the national forest policy of 1988. Okay, so that is also one part that you have to know. Fine. Then another very small topic about forestry and types of forestry that we also have to know. This has also been asked in the previous question, so we'll quickly have a look at. Okay, so forestry is basically the science and craft of creating, managing, planting, using, conserving and repairing the forests. Okay, and the woodlands for associated resources for human and environmental benefits. Okay, so almost a similar definition to what we had seen in the silviculture. In silviculture, we had basically spoken about establishment, development, care and reproduction. Okay, here we are saying it's a science and craft of creating, managing, planting, using, conserving, repairing the forests, woodlands for humans and environmental benefits. In both the two definitions, we had also seen environmental, social and ecological or economic being an important part. Okay, then what are the different types of forestry? So similarly, you based on the type of usage, we can have protection forestry. A similar thing also we had seen in the objectives of management, where we had referred to the National Commission on Agriculture 1976. Okay, so the types of forestry can include protection forestry. So this is going to be solely from the purpose of saving the ecology, conservation, management of biodiversity. Okay, however, at the level of production, we have seen commercial forestry and industrial forestry, and here of course we talk a lot about plantations. Today at the end of the lecture, we'll also see what are the factors which will affect the choice of overall plantations. Okay, what are the factors? And here also we'll see some important locality based factors, right? Similarly for industrial forestry also, in many of these cases, even the Campa Compensatory Afforestation Management and Planning Authority is going to be in news, and again this would derive from the Forest Conservation Act way back of 1980, and of course this act has been amended in 2023. Okay, so these are few things that we know. Protection, production. Also important is the social aspect here. In social we can talk about farm forestry, recreational forestry, extension forestry. Extension forestry is, let's say the forestry is being carried out in this particular area, so in the suburbs or in the extended areas where all we can go for this part, right? Restoration of degraded lands. Again, for example, in paper 1B we will cover a topic, the restoration or afforestation in difficult or degraded lands. Let's say the ravines of Chambal, okay, or the desert based areas, or the areas which are highly saline or highly acidic. Okay, so how can we restore the degraded areas? If we restore the degraded areas, we will create more jobs. Okay, livelihood, employment opportunities for people, right? So this also is going to be an important factor. So right from protection, production, social, these are important aspects that we know. Another important part which has got some new again relevance is the aspect of urban forestry. Okay, now urban areas are, number one, there are there's very limited space here, higher pollution, so there is also a lot of need to go for urban forestry. And in this context you can always remember and even write down the Miyawaki method. Okay, so when we talk about the Miyawaki method, we can talk about, again, let's say Prime Minister Modi in his one of the recent Man Ki Baat episodes spoke about the Miyawaki method, has already been asked in UPSC prelims once. Okay, and Akira Miyawaki was a Japanese botanist. The whole idea here was creating dense urban forest in a very small area. Okay, so Miyawaki method is being implemented in India, and here we are using indigenous or the native varieties. Okay, in a very short or let's say very compact area. The idea is to create dense urban forests. So overall what happens? Better utilization of space. Then in a span of almost 2 to 3 years, these forests, they become self-sustaining. Okay, and when they become self-sustaining, which means you don't have to employ additional manpower for the tending or different operations looking after, right? So because of this, this is also overall a good part. Additionally, these forests grow very fast, and it is not as a monoculture plantation that you only have one particular tree or a plant. You here different types of plants are closely compacted in a very short space. So again, in a very short span of time, they are able to grow very fast. That is again one of the peculiarities. Okay, and again this is one area. For example, Prime Minister cited the example of Kerala-based teacher Rafi Ramnath, who had used. So again, these kind of case study or example you can use. This technique to transform barren land into a mini forest known as Vidya Vanam. Okay, known as Vidya Vanam. Here a lot of planting of trees was done. If you see, this is the barren part here, and this is how this has been restored. Okay, so this is again an important part that you can just remember related to the Miyawaki. Okay, and just for very quick revision, again simple mind maps like this will be very useful, where we say this also helps in rapid forest development. So again, takes shorter span of time, the rotation period is slow here overall, supports high level of biodiversity, high carbon sequestration. Remember yesterday we had discussed, when we discussed the role or the benefit of forests, how mangroves sequester a lot of carbon dioxide. Couple of examples of species that I overall spoke about was Avicennia species, okay, Sonartia species, and when we do this in this mangrove silviculture part, we'll also see Heritria species, we'll also see the Rhizophora species. Okay, other particular attributes we'll also see that. This also helps in, because ultimately trees and forests are very good sources or lungs of the earth. This also helps in noise and air pollution reduction. Okay, soil quality is improved. In fact, you can, if a question is the benefits of urban forestry or benefits of Miyawaki, while these are 5 or some 7-8 points, you can still segregate this like we saw yesterday. Provisioning services, regulating services, supporting services, and lastly we can again talk about the aesthetic and cultural services. Okay, so that again can be spoken about. So improved soil quality, sustainable water management, so this also helps, and lastly regulating the surface temperature. Now these aspects, while I'll also briefly touch upon today when I talk about edaphic or the soil based factors, but this we'll also see again when we do paper 1B. For example, in paper 1B, if we just have a look at the syllabus, when we'll do this part, forest soils, soil conservation and watershed management, here we will again talk about it. Okay, so that is why you will see that silviculture general is almost connected to all these topics, and not just paper 1B, even in paper 2 also. Fine. So the more we do all the topics, the better your answers will be, the better your understanding will also be. Fine. Okay, so it also regulates the surface temperature. These are some of the main benefits that we see of the Miyawaki method. All right. Now we have had established what was the important role the forest plays. Yes, that was very clear to us yesterday. For forest, there are always 3 things whenever you are writing an answer, right? From the very starting lectures, I've made it sure that you also focus on answer writing. Again, please note in this slide, we are talking about bond challenge. This is something that you also did in your prelims. So of course, it is very important to restore, protect and save the forests. So whenever you're writing in this regard, and whenever you have to write for India and the world, there are 3 things that you can always mention. Okay, so related to forests, so one thing is that we know, as per the national forest policy, the target is 33%. Right now we are at 24.62%. Okay, so this is something that we have to achieve, number 1. Second thing, India's commitments in the Paris agreement. Okay, when we had sent our pledges, here one of the pledges was to have 2.5 ton to 3 okay, that carbon sink has to be created, and this carbon sink has to be created by, of course, afforestation. And lastly, we had also seen, and we should also remember, in fact, the commitment in the bond challenge. Okay, in bond challenge there is a commitment to restore forests and degraded lands. Okay, so for here also there are targets. It has to be achieved till 2030. India has made its pledges in Paris Agreement. Okay, and in every COP, recently the COP 28 happened, now COP 29 is supposed to happen in Azerbaijan. Okay, so again our commitments are always highlighted. Okay, so this is one, and again in the National Forest Policy, the previous one, and even in the 1988 National Forest Policy, we have been outlining our commitments to this particular part here. Okay, so this is one aspect that we'll overall remember, right? So this is one thing that you can overall note down, that what are the aspects that you will always say. So whenever you have to write, you can quote India's commitment here. Okay, right. Now coming back, so again this will take a lot of decades, but overall this will help us. And in fact we can also say, not just this, we can even add, just a second, we can add even India's commitment to net zero outlined in the COP 26 or as India's Panchamrit to become net zero by 2070. So that also requires us to go for afforestation. Okay, so all these things can be there, and even in the recent speeches in the recent, for example, the Forest Conservation Act, this is also there in mentioned in the preamble. Okay, right. Acha, okay, I think I've not written billion here. This is 2.5 billion tons, 3 billion tons of carbon sink, not tons. Tons will be too small. Okay, and this I think you would have already read many a times. So just keep these 4 things in mind whenever there is an aspect of why something is to be done in your forestry optional or wherever in GK also. If you have to write these 4 points, you should remember: National Forest Policy, Paris Agreement, Bonn Challenge, and net zero. This is what you can use. Okay, then so this part is one, that why do we need to save the forest. Okay, now we have Food and Agriculture Organization, which plays a very important part in the conservation of forest. Okay, and there is a World Forestry Congress that happens. So one of the recent congress, the most recent congress happened in South Korea, in Seoul. That is why you have the Seoul Declaration. Okay, so if you again get a question, let's say what is the importance of forest, you can mention the basic importance, but you can end with the Seoul Declaration. Okay, by the recent World Forestry Congress. Here only a couple of points I'll tell you what were the most important points. One, need to triple 3x the investments for restoring the degraded land by 2030. Okay, that we can triple the investments. And when I say degraded land, you can again link this to UNCCD. Okay, desertification. So higher need of investment is needed. That was the one part that was outlined here. Other than that, a lot of things were said about why the forests again need to be saved. We already know why they need to be saved, but as per the declaration, why they need to be saved. Okay, so there, here also, whatever points you find, this and the other facts, if you combine all of this, you will always have enough content to write a very good answer, right? So one, this cooperation outlined the need for international cooperation. Okay, that the countries must come together to restore the degraded lands. Forests are vital for biodiversity. Okay, so we also know, think about, for example, Amazon rainforest, but on the contrary, also think about the Australian bushfires. Okay, or because of climate change, increasing forest fires. Although we know that most of the forest fires, as per IUCN, are caused by the human interventions. Okay, so be it Amazon, the lungs of these support a lot of biodiversity, very important, right? Then the declaration again outlined that there is a need for use of innovative technology. Okay, which means the more focus should happen on research and development, and we can say that India's investment on research and development is less. We spend around 0.6 to 0.7% of the GDP on this, which again needs to be increased. Okay, there's a need for newer partnerships. Now we are talking of desertification, we are talking of degradation. So here again, one thing that you read in your prelims also, this red and red plus. By the way, you can also use this red and red plus also in paper 1B. In paper 1B, we again have a topic of environment, conservation and biodiversity, and additionally you also have in 2B also reducing the emissions from deforestation and degradation and forest plus. Okay, so here also there are different, for example, assuring the future of forests with integrated risk management, AFIRM. Okay, so this also is a mechanism. Similarly, sustaining the abundance of forest ecosystem, safe initiative, again by red plus. Fine. Again, the declaration outlined the close relationship between the human health and forest, reducing the risk for future pandemics. Okay, and focus on sustainable wood. Okay, even right now a lot of forest operations which are going on, which is why later on I'll also tell you things like reduced impact logging, RIL. Okay, other mechanisms, so that while we want to have wood, but it should be a sustainable, which means the silvicultural operations also have to be having innovative technology, better partnerships, international cooperation. That is how you can talk about how whole, let's say in a whole format, we can link this particular part. Okay. So before I go to the next topic, again, I hope this part is clear to you, that how would you link it. So far, if you were to overall see, because almost one kind of a question on importance of forest or the recent context will always be asked. Fine. So here you know that, for example, talking of forests, so now you can talk about, if you talk about, let's say, data, quote Indian State of Forest Report 2021, okay, or you can even quote ISRO's Land Degradation and Desertification Atlas, or you can quote FAO, Food and Agriculture Organization's State of the World's Forest Report. Okay, any of this? In this we already know that here India's target was 33, but right now we are at 24.62%. ISRO's Land Degradation and Desertification Atlas says that in the last decade, both desertification and degradation has increased, which means it is something bad, negative. Okay, in the last 10 years, this has increased. Okay, and similarly, FAO, when it talks about the state of the world's forest report, it also highlights that globally there is a problem of desertification and land degradation. Okay, that is the data that you can highlight. Second thing that we can do here is the benefits that we know. Okay, so here just remember, we had seen 16 to 17 points yesterday: provisioning services, supporting, regulating, and cultural services, and examples for each of them, that also we had seen, proper with technical scientific names. Then third is the overall, I think what we can say this as, India or at the global level, what is happening. And the more you write it, this will be ingrained in your memory. So right from the National Forest Policy to the Paris Agreement to the Bonn Challenge to the commitment in net zero. Now this Bonn Challenge is also linked to UNCCD, or you can even mention UNCCD, or even if you're not, then RED or RED plus. Okay, the 5 points here, 16, 17 points here that you have in benefits. And finally, if you have to conclude, or for a conclusion, you can talk about the World Forestry Congress, the recent Seoul Declaration. Some of the aspects from this we can borrow, what can be done. So this overall can be used across your papers, right? So use it as much as possible, use it as liberally as possible. Fine. So this is what we can talk about overall forests from a 360-degree perspective, what all you need to know. Fine. Data you have, benefits you have, right? The Indian or the global context you have, World Forestry Congress you also have, right? Additionally, if you even want, you can even write even we can quote IUCN, okay, or even you can quote word WWF. For example, the Living Planet report also highlights the high level of deforestation going on. Okay, so that is also one. And there is also, if I were to add one more thing, when we talk about the evil quartet overall, okay, or the factors which negatively impact biodiversity, so one factor will always be deforestation. Fine. So we'll go about deforestation, and these are again topics you do in more detail in paper 2B also, but generally also in general studies you also know. Fine. So this is what you have to keep in mind, and whenever you write, so again, for example, I've told you WWF in its Living Planet report has always highlighted how deforestation is a huge challenge. Fine. So again, make the use of what you've already done in your prelims, right? This is how you'll be able to get or fetch more marks. Fine. So this is one. This was the 15th World Forestry Congress, which happened in South Korea, Seoul. That was what I was referring to. Fine. So that is one. Now let us talk about locality factors. Okay, now locality factors is, again, I will say, the backbone of forestry, because here everything that we'll read about, okay, is going to be determined by these locality factors, right? So this is one thing that we have to do in good detail. Again, paper 1A, 1B, 2A, 2B, everywhere we'll find locality factors. Okay, so again, think what are the factors which will influence any location. Okay, so any of these locations will be let's say influenced by, so if I just light the what are the factors that are affecting locality, right? So this can be the factors which affect the climate, okay, the factors affecting the soil. Soil is also known as edaphic factors, okay. I can even say biotic factors, and I will explain all of them one by one. Topographic or topographic or physiographic factors. We can even say human factors, and if I add the aspect of technology, etc., if that is being used, etc., so technological or technical factors, I can say that. Okay, now one by one we'll have a look at, and then for each of the sections we'll have a good discussion here. This is again an area every year 2 questions at least from here, 1 compulsory or 1 10 marker. Similarly, you will find in some of the areas. In fact, I'll also tell you in 2023 also there were some questions that were asked, right? So when I say climate, in climate we will say, now this will have again many subparts. For example, the variations in temperature. If the temperature, for example, is going to vary, and by the way, temperature is going to be responsible. First, I'll explain this to you, then we'll also go through the slides. For example, if there's a variation in temperature, okay, so this will impact photosynthesis. This will impact transpiration, okay, because if there's a change in radiation, the direct impact will be on photosynthesis. This will impact the ecological productivity of the forests, right? So temperature is one major part that is going to impact, right? And when I say temperature, even now think about climate change. Okay, there is a global warming that is happening, and yesterday we had seen a term that was known as phenology, okay, which determines that at what time the flowering, the fruiting of the plants is going to happen. Now already we have seen the temperature soaring, and because of that the changes are also happening in monsoon, etc. So, and because of that the phenology is also going to change, okay. So temperature is a major factor. Then if you see, for example, wind, okay, so number 1, wind influences how the seed movement happens, okay. So wind again plays an important role in even the pollination, the dispersal of seeds, okay. Sometimes you have high wind or even no wind, so even wind will determine how this whole the locality is going to be impacted, and this will influence the overall vegetation, right? Other, for example, climate, how much moisture is there. I can even say barometric, the pressure in that region at that point of time, okay. Availability of light, or let's say overall solar radiation, light, okay. So there are some species which are light demander, okay. Some of them are shade demander. They grow better when there is a shade. You will use these terms, light demander, okay, shade demander, or frost. In fact, when I say it here also, we can even link frost. And when I say frost, we'll also see in the coming the different types of frost that are there, right? And what is the impact of frost on regeneration, right? This is also going to impact. So again, just for a quick summary, be it moisture, be it light, be it frost, be it temperature, all these are again related to climate, and they also have an important bearing, okay, on how the locality is, how the yield is going to be. So these are important factors. When we see soil or edaphic, okay, Very basic things. The pH of the soil. Is the soil too acidic? Is the soil too basic? This is also going to determine the locality. Okay. This soil also, how much nutrient availability is there, the nutrient cycling that is happening, the nutrition available to the plant. This also is a very important factor. So soil here will play an important role. Here even, for example, we will also talk about, for example, Mycorrhiza and the different types, Ecto, endo, Mycorrhiza. Here we'll also go and we'll also have a look at Biofertilizers. Right, so this also plays an important role. Then we have biotic factors. Okay, now if I were to replace what we've written, what are the factors affecting vegetation, I can again club them into biotic as well as abiotic factors. In biotic factors, we will talk about the interactions which are happening between the species. Now when I say the interactions between the species, you would also be reminded of things like mutualism, parasitism, predation, commensalism, amensalism, all these terms. So this is happening between the species. Okay. Then what about the humans? Humans and the species. Now I've also taken this explicitly as a dimension here, but if you want to subsume it, you can subsume it within biotic also, right? So excessive intervention by humans leading to deforestation, leading to encroachment, leading to the degradation of the areas. This also has a bearing on the locality. Okay. So this is one. And then here also we can talk about pest attacks. Now when I say pest attack, think again about locusts. So during COVID-19 there was a huge pest attack that was also seen by the overall locust attack. And again when we link climate change, so even climate change is leading to more pest attacks globally, more diseases that are coming up, especially in the tropical regions. Okay. So biotic factors here also, so pest being the attacks by the pest of wild animals or the injuries they cause, this also is going to have a bearing, right? Then topographic factors. Topographic factors are also known as physiographic. Topographic, physiographic. Okay, similar, right? Here you can think about the slope. If the slope is very steep, there is going to be more erosion if the water is going to go through, right? Which can also impact the vegetation. If the slope, the slope is moderate versus steep, that is one. Then topography, here also things like altitude, things like latitude. So here also we know, for example, just like the variation happens when we move the tropics, okay, or let's say when we move from latitude, so from equator, when you move towards the higher ones to tropical, temperate or the Arctic part, there is a change in vegetation. Same thing also happens when there is a change in altitude, that is also known as, one is latitudinal zonation of forests, the other is latitudinal. I'll show all of this via images, via the species that are also formed, so don't worry, we are just having an overview here. Okay, so this also is an important part. Parts like aspect, okay, so which part of the slope is directly getting the sunlight. Okay, so for example, when we say this is a mountain, there's a windward side and there's a leeward side. On the windward side you have more rain coming in, because of that there is higher vegetation on the windward side. Okay, for example, if we talk about the southwest monsoons coming in, so you have more clouds here, better, more water, moisture laden winds, higher rain on the windward side and very less on the leeward side. So the vegetation or aspect is the part of the slope which is facing the sunlight. Okay, so the part which is facing the sunlight is of course going to have higher vegetation. Okay, so this is also something we can understand here. Okay, then these two factors, human factor. Okay, so human here also, this can be both positive and negative, which means if we have cooperation by the tribals, okay, joint forest management, this can lead to better management overall. We can even say, let's say if there is a very scientific approach to the management, there is scientific silvicultural management. Okay, combined with the goodwill of the people, if you club in the social angle, it is a positive part, but it can also be negative, as we have seen throughout industrial revolution, throughout that how many areas were almost blotched away. The people also evicted forcefully. The rights were also not respected. So human factor can be both positive and negative, okay, which will also determine some of these factors here. Because if we know, let's say, let's link human to this part. If we know there is a presence, if there is a big, let's say, forest here, okay, and if there is a presence of a lot of wild animals, let me also connect this to the wildlife conflict, okay. So again, in India, you see a lot of tigers or the man-eaters or the wolves. You will find them in a lot of sugarcane fields, okay, and sugarcane plantations also yield money, which is why it is being done. So if there is a good human surveillance, proper fencing that is done, good use of technology, and again proper reporting, these, first of all, human animal conflict can be reduced, and second, the deaths related to the human animal conflict can also be reduced, okay. But many times this does not happen. There's a lot of distrust even between the peoples and the officials, and additionally this keeps on going on, so that is also an issue, right? Similarly, to save other from wild animals, so here also human intervention is important, right? Similarly for soil also, if the soil is becoming too acidic, the application of, let's say, gypsum, okay, etc., or important fertilizers can also help in overall maintaining the pH balance, okay. Use of microorganisms like rhizobium, like fungus, for example Mycorrhiza, can also help in having a better high quality soil, okay. So you will find that in all these areas, for example, even in moisture, in wind, in some areas, the human intervention can also play an important role, right? That is one. And when we talk about finally the technical aspect here, so which we can talk about, the technical part will be related to the silvicultural management or the forest management aspect, okay. You can even talk about how forest economics can also be applied here, okay. So these things will overall give us a fair idea about how this whole topic is to be understood, okay. So again, recapping, and then again one by one we'll have a look at. So we have seen what are the factors which affect the locality. You have climatic factors always, okay, soil or the edaphic factors, you have biotic factors, topographic factors, human, and technical, okay. Now whenever you see a question, this is going to be a very easy framework to understand, and of course I'll build on more details now. For example, if you see a question, why a particular plantation or why a particular crop or a species failed, you can go for these factors, okay. It probably would have been issues related to these things were not managed, or the issues in soil, the species when the season was not there, etc. Some biotic issues, some topographical issues, that can be one of our answers, okay. Similarly, there is a often repeated questions, what are the factors, okay, that govern the choice of exotic species, okay. What are the factors that are taken into account in afforestation? Again, these factors affecting locality, okay. So again, remember, this is one, factors affecting locality. Now factors affecting locality is also known as, overall, these are also the, in our syllabus there is a term known as, let me just go back to the syllabus so that you again can keep this, just a second, okay. In silviculture general, the very first thing that we see is the mention of two things: ecological and physiological, ecological and physiological factors which are affecting vegetation. So all these climatic, edaphic, biotic, and topographic, all these are ecological factors. Physiological factors, we'll also see that what is the response to the increasing stress by the plants, etc. So when we are done with the topic, we'll also connect it to this particular part of the heading of the syllabus: ecological and physiological factors which are affecting the vegetation, okay. I hope this part will get very clear to you very shortly. Fine, okay. So we were discussing here what are the factors affecting the locality. Again, terms like what are the ecological factors which affect any particular site, they can ask you in different ways, but this is what is going to be, okay. So this has to be the cornerstone of our understanding, that we will talk about the climatic, the soil, the biotic, the topographic, even the human, and even this part here, okay. Even this part you may sometimes ignore because human can be covered in biotic also, but these four have to be the cornerstones and the pillars of our understanding, all right. Now This is again how you can remember for yourself: climatic, edaphic, topographic, biotic. I have even added here the human and the technical overall aspect. Okay. Now let us see this one by one, and let us again have a good understanding here. Now for each of them there will be very specific points that again have to be in your notes. Okay, so again, while this is a crash course, there are some points with species for each of the parts that I'll make you write down. Fine. So let us just go through this one part here one by one. Right. Now we see this is the forest vegetation. This is the climate. Okay. Climate factors can be temperature, the common factors like we saw. Seasons, even in the variation of seasons, the productivity of these forests can be different, which can also affect. Precipitation, how much rainfall is going to happen. Too much rainfall, too less rainfall. Too less will be issues of drought. Too much rainfall, again flooding, which is also problematic. Light, sometimes too much of light is available. We'll also see terms like light demander, shade demander, for example, very shortly. Okay, we will see in coming classes, in this lecture also, in coming classes also, terms like light demander is the one, they need light to survive. Okay, so again, for example, if we see there are trees, tall trees, and then there are, let's say, very short trees. The short trees are already growing in a shade. The tall trees here are ones that require light. Then there are shade demanders. The shade demanders are the ones they actually need shade. But there's also a term, for example, we'll see shade tolerant. Okay, so they can tolerate shade. So they will be almost in the middle of the spectrum. So one who demand light, who demand shade, but there are ones who can also tolerate shade. So in all these aspects, at least two example each you should know. Okay, and again, as we move along and as we do silviculture, systems and other species, slowly and steadily you will be accumulating examples for all these basic parts here. Okay, now this is the tree species. These are the roots from this tree. For example, we are talking of, yesterday I gave you the example of sal. Okay, Shoria robusta. Let's say the leaf is going to fall. There's a lot of litter here. The decomposition happens, and because of this, the organic content, the humus content will improve in the soil. Okay, there are roots here. The roots have small nodules. Okay, right. So for example, in these nodules there are microorganisms, like there's a bacteria known as rhizobium. Okay, fungus known as Mycorrhiza. So they actually play a very important part in the decomposition of nitrogen. Right, this is also being done here. Then when you have the soil, okay, in soil there are few things. For example, organic matter, pH, soil moisture itself. So one, moisture is there in air also, but in soil also there is soil moisture. How much is the nutrient content? We know about N, P, K. We also know about macronutrients and micronutrients. We'll also see this very shortly. Okay, cations and our anions exchange all of this nutrient part. Okay, so when we see the whole locality and these interactions, we will get to know what are the various processes that are happening here. Fine. So here first I think we are starting with how the edaphic part, okay, and then again the parts that we've discussed we'll go through and have a look at. Fine. So one by one we will just quickly have a look here. Now the very first question that let us pose to ourselves: how edaphic factors affect the forest and trees? How the edaphic factors affect the forest and trees? Here again my tip is that if you remember the top or the main point, you will be able to elaborate on it. So don't focus too much here. Okay, so while I've added a lot of keywords in the explanation, but our main focus has to be, if we know this, we will be able to recall this in the exam. That is why infographics like this also help. If you remember, there is organic matter, nutrient, pH, soil moisture, cations, etc. Based on that you can also formulate an answer, right? So again let us discuss this one by one. So how do these edaphic, which means the soil factors, affect forest and trees, right? So number one thing is soil composition and texture. Now whatever keywords I am explaining and outlining, this you should note down separately, okay? Like soil composition, when we say, it includes, there is how much is the proportion of sand, how much proportion of silt, how much proportion of clay that is going to be present overall, right? So sand, silt, clay, how much this is there, and this is going to impact how much water is getting stored, how much water retention is there, okay, how much permeability is going to be, how much nutrient availability, drainage, okay. So this is going to be an important factor here. Now we have seen loamy soils, there are sandy soils, alluvial soils, etc., right? So for example, when we say sandy soil, so here they will drain very quickly, okay, they may lack nutrients. However, if it is a clay soil will hold more water, right? Of course we have a proper unit where we have to talk about forest soils, okay, but this again is for the topic that is already there, right? But here they will be very poorly aerated because they are holding a lot of water, the air cannot pass through them, right? This is there. So that is why composition is going to be an important determinant, and even the texture is going to be an important determinant in soils, okay. Similarly, soil pH, okay. So soil pH, remember, of course, high if the soil is too acidic or too basic, this is also going to influence the vegetation around it. So we want to have an optimum pH, that is one, okay. Acidic soils, if there is too acidic, it will limit the essential nutrients like calcium, magnesium and phosphorus, which is again very important for tree growth, which is why when you see there is a lot of, let's say, water logging, of this water becomes too acidic in general, so this does not promote a lot of tree growth, okay. That is there. Then the availability of nutrient, there is again a topic that we see about nutrient cycling, okay. In nutrient cycling you have both gaseous nutrients and also land based or the terrestrial nutrients, fine. So soil nutrients, and here we can talk about nitrogen, NPK, okay, these are macronutrients, but we also have micronutrients, right? So these are again vital for tree growth, which means if you have them in abundance, fine, but if these are very less because of leaching or because of again pollution, this is going to be an important part, okay. Moisture, right? So here again, how much water overall available is there with the roots, if they absorb it or take it up, then the work of xylem starts, okay. So here tree survival, growth rate, of course, is going to be dependent on how much moisture do we have and how much moisture is going to be, right? This will also impact the stress tolerance in that region, okay. Here remember, for example, we have waterlogged soils. Now waterlogged soils can lead to the suffocation of roots, okay. So that is why in waterlogged conditions, think about areas where, for example, terai regions, sometimes there is a lot of waterlogging happening, okay. However, if this overall area is very dry, this can also lead to drought stress, okay. And in both the regions, the roots are also different to cope up with this stress and challenge, okay. So this is also one thing you have to understand. Then even the part of soil drainage and aeration, okay. If the soil is properly drained, they will not have enough issues, okay. However, if it is a poorly drained soil, then it can even lead to the root getting rot, okay, and ultimately getting more damaged, right? So this is why adequate aeration is also important. That is why when you see mangroves, okay, in mangroves we are also the kind of different adaptations that they have air breathing roots, okay. So overall the kind of roots are there, so there are, because the whole condition is waterlogged, there is a lot of salinity also in that region, so mangroves have already had the adaptation here, and there is, just a second, this is air breathing roots, which is also known as pneumatophores, okay. The mangroves having the air breathing roots, pneumatophores, okay. So this is one part here. This also impacts how the nutrient uptake is there, and this is the overall physiological process that goes through, fine. In addition to this, again edaphic factors will also determine, and after we are done with this, I'll also tell you some specific species with examples. This can be again in your answer. This is going to differentiate your answer, right? Soil erosion and stability. Okay, so this soil erosion, etc. So where we can see the loss of the fertile topsoil, this can also be happening here. Okay, if soil erosion happens, soil erosion can happen through both wind, water. The abrasive effect of wind and water can lead to the loss of fertile soil. Okay, so whatever tree establishment is present, whatever growth is there, this can be a problem. Okay, however, if you have stable soils, this can resist erosion. Okay, so this overall helps in the root growth and overall stability of the ecosystem. So that is one important part here. All right, then the soil structure and the compaction that is going to be there, right? So when you we see the soil structure, there are different layers, the O horizon, A horizon, etc. That also we'll see. Compaction is overall caused by the human activities. Okay, if this a lot of compaction happens, now this will limit the root penetration and the infiltration that can happen, which means the water is not properly available to the roots also, it cannot percolate. So again, the growth of the tree or the plant is going to be impacted, right? Heavily compacted soils by human interventions is going to also limit the nutrient and water absorption here. Okay, so this is also one important part that you understand, right? Other than this, if we talk about the soil microorganisms, here again I'll give you a list of microorganisms, but for now you can remember examples like rhizobium, blue-green algae, okay, mycorrhiza. Abundance of microorganism is going to be very much important for soil fertility, for better ecological functions. However, if these microorganisms get destroyed, then there will be a negative impact. Fine. So be it mycorrhiza, the fungus, beneficial bacteria like the rhizobium, they play a very important part in the nutrient cycling, and they again play important part in the nutrient availability, right? So this is an important part. This helps in the forest ecosystem. Then last again part that we can also have a look at is the soil contamination. Now there can be heavy metals, okay, which get leached to the soil, which again happens even if I talk about cadmium, okay, even if we talk about arsenic, even if we talk about uranium, right? This can happen. Pollutants from human activities, okay. So this will impact the tree health. The nutrient will not be available. It will again, the chemicals will also leach. So this can be problematic, okay, which will have again problems related to growth and the life of these trees, right? So overall we have discussed around 9 points, which is more than enough for you to outline any answer, that how the edaphic factors are affecting the forest and trees. Okay, so that is one part that you see here. Okay, I was talking about the root nodules. Okay, and sometimes you even get questions like, just to define the root nodules, simple you can show here. Let's say this is a leguminous plant. Okay, so here you can even talk about examples. This can be gram, okay, chickpea, etc., which are leguminous plants. Here you have a root nodule, okay, and this the nitrogen fixing bacteria. So here the example that we can talk about, let's say rhizobium, we were talking about microorganisms, right? They will fix the atmospheric nitrogen into nitrogenous compounds. Okay, so again when you read, there is a full-fledged topic that you read about nitrogen cycle. In nitrogen cycle we talk about nitrogen fixation. Fixation can be done by through atmosphere, through process like thunder and lightning, through industrial processes, but also through microorganisms. Okay, even through process like decomposition, right? So here this is the part that you also have to know, that in the root nodule you can have nitrogen fixing bacteria like rhizobium, which can overall be very important. Okay, that is one. Now before we talk about mycorrhiza, there are a couple of points that you can write down. This is again going to be with respect to the part we've just discussed. Okay, so here we are talking of the aspect related to the soil. Okay, so in the soil, just give me a second. I hope, yes. So we are talking about the overall aspect of soil here, okay? So few species wise, I just want you so that you have some idea here. So there are three or four points that you can write down how soil here impact, okay? First example that you can write down is, and I'm talking about the soil pH here with species. So please write, in acidic laterite soils of Western Ghats, species like cashew and eucalyptus survive. Species like cashew and eucalyptus survive. Okay. So here we are writing the major examples, okay, that you can write for Edaphic. So here, for example, the first thing that we are talking about is the acidic laterite soils in Western Ghats. Here, cashew, and that is why you see a lot of plantations in this region. Eucalyptus, that is one that you can write down. Okay. Second thing, here also we gave the example. For example, the salinity is also going to be a part which will impact how the nutrients are going to be available, because we spoke about, for example, the water-logged regions. Now we already know mangroves are halophytes, which means they are salt-tolerant varieties. So write down the second example is salinity. Okay. So here two species we will write. Avicennia marina, okay, or you can just write down the line overall. Mangroves like Avicennia marina and Rhizophora mucronata. This again we'll see the same species when we talk about the silviculture of mangroves. Species like mangrove species like Avicennia marina, Rhizophora mucronata thrive in saline soils due to their ability to exclude or excrete salt. Due to their ability to exclude or excrete salt. Okay. That is the second example for salinity that you can write. Next example, and this is with respect to the type of soils also, just a point we can write down so that we remember. There are different soils that are found in India. So based on that, one or two examples that you should know overall. Okay, so one example simple we can write down: alluvial soils found in Indo-Gangetic plains. Alluvial soils found in Indo-Gangetic plain. Support species like, there can be many species, a couple of species you can write down. Support species like bamboo. Support species like bamboo. Okay. Then second we can talk about red soils. Red soils. Now, yesterday we had spoken about how sal trees are also prominent in the Central Asian region, so Central India region. So we are talking of red soils. So here you can write down, in areas like the Chota Nagpur Plateau, it supports sal, palash. Sal we know, Shorea robusta. Palash is Butea monosperma. Again, remember, in the first word, the first letter is going to be capital. In the second word, the first letter is small. You have to have a space between the two, and you have to underline both of them separately. You don't have to have a common single marking. Alluvial soil, example of bamboo. Red soil, especially in the Chota Nagpur region, like Sal and Palash. And last example you can write down in this particular part. For example, in the black soils that we have in Deccan Plateau. Okay, black soil, which is again volcanic in origin, the black soil of Deccan Plateau. For that, you can just write it favors species like babool. Favors species like babool. A very quick homework. Now you have to check what is the scientific name of this babool species. Right? So the examples in Edaphic, we've seen cashew, eucalyptus in acidic laterite soils. For salinity part, Avicennia marina, Rhizophora mucronata. And again, the examples I'm telling you, try to commit them to memory, because for any mangrove, if you remember only these two, at least you will get good marks for these technical names, right? For soils here, as alluvial, red and black, overall this is what you can write. Other than that, the basic how the edaphic factors affect the soil, the forest and trees is all what we've seen. Fine. Okay. Now let's talk about another important part, that is mycorrhiza. Okay. Now actually mycorrhiza is going to be a topic which has been many times repeated. So we will do this in slight detail. Okay. Here you can simply draw the diagram also. We will see the difference between mycorrhiza. Okay. And we'll also see the part related to biofertilizers. Okay. Now before I do this and start here, this is just one part you can write down. Acha, this is here. You can write a overall broad heading. Okay, biofertilizers. Now in biofertilizers, we'll see the benefits etc. later on, but first you should know there are microorganisms that are used, because the name is biofertilizers. Bio means there has to be a living organism which will help in the process of this fertilizing. So what can be the microorganisms here? We have organisms like the bacteria. The example is, okay, you have, by the way, we also have blue green algae. Again, if we remember Azolla fern. Fungus, the example is, okay, mycorrhiza. So right now we are doing mycorrhiza. After that we'll come back to biofertilizers. Then we will see overall the benefits or the advantages they have. Fine. Although you also know what positives we can talk about. Okay. So again, if you get a question like this, you can also segregate this. Okay, what are the microorganisms that are helpful in this creation of these biofertilizers? What are the advantages they have, etc. Okay. So now we are now discussing this part of mycorrhiza here. Okay. So mycorrhiza broadly is of two types. You have endomycorrhiza, you have ectomycorrhiza, and then there is also endo-ectomycorrhiza. Okay, we will understand this diagram, but before that let me also explain to you overall what it helps in. Generally, of course, one thing till now I have told you that mycorrhiza, this myco actually means fungus, and this is helpful in nitrogen fixation. It improves the quality of soil. Okay, so there are many benefits which mycorrhiza gives. Okay, so first thing that you have to remember, first we'll see this simple diagram, a very simple diagram that you can draw in the exam hall. Remember, the mycorrhiza or even the rhizobium association is known as the symbiotic association. Okay, in fact, the part you have seen rhizobium, etc. That also I'll try to segregate into free living, into symbiotic associations for your understanding. But remember, this is a symbiotic or a mutualistic association where both are benefited. The plant is also benefited and the fungus is also benefited here. Okay, so number one, it's a symbiotic association. Now, in a very simple format, you have a plant without the mycorrhiza, you have a plant with the mycorrhiza. Okay, so when mycorrhiza is present, it is helpful in extracting. So what is the main benefit? The plant becomes more efficient in extracting more nutrients and water. One, it reduces the need for chemical fertilizers, because here we are working as a biofertilizer. Okay, plant is resistant to this disease and other abiotic stress. Okay, now the plant can face two types of stresses. Plant can face biotic stresses. Think they can be a small insect or an aphid. Okay, so this is overall a biotic stress. There can also be abiotic stress. We have seen abiotic factors, be it climate, be it other parts, be it soil related. Now, because of the presence of mycorrhiza, the plant is resistant to the diseases. Okay, when I say the plant is resistant, there is a term that is known as MIR. Okay, which is the mycorrhiza induced resistant. Okay, mycorrhiza induced resistance is an important part, that is something that we need to know. Okay, mycorrhiza induced resistance, right? So again, when we are seeing what is the importance of mycorrhiza, that is one part, just few basic points we have seen. Now let us see this in more detail also. Okay, again for our own understanding, so that we understand this better, there are few things that I've overall we will talk about. Okay, they are beneficial, they form a symbiotic relation with the plant roots. This is what we have seen. Okay, so what happens, the fungus actually receives the sugar from the root, and in exchange it absorbs and sends the soil nutrients and the water, particularly if we talk about phosphorus. Other nutrients also it helps, but overall, because of the presence of mycorrhiza, what actually happens, better absorption of soil nutrients and water happens. This is again a win for the plant, and also a win happens to this because it is getting the sugar in return. Okay, now when these water, or let's say these nutrients, are getting depleted, the fungus, it's going more and more to the roots, or it will go deeper into the soil for more usage of this water or nutrients. Okay, so you can draw a diagram like this where the sugar the fungus is getting and better utilization of water and nutrients is happening. Okay, that is one important part here, right? Now, what are the overall benefits? Again, few points for us to remember. Only remember the keywords here. Number one, nutrient enhancement, higher absorption of nutrients, especially phosphorus and micronutrients. How does this happen? Because the surface area or the root surface area is better. Okay, expanding the root surface area, right? So there is a larger soil volume that they can access, and that is why there is a better absorption that happens. That's point number one. Water uptake. So again, we've seen nutrient. Second is water. The water uptake efficiency because of mycorrhiza is better. Okay, better water uptake efficiency. So plants' ability to withstand drought and water stress by exploring the deeper layers of soil is far better here in this context. Okay, that's the second point. Third is stress tolerance. This also is a keyword we saw, that plant is able to withstand other stresses, abiotic stresses. Okay, now the mycorrhizal associations helps or increases the resilience of plants to stresses like the nutrient deficiencies, even pathogens, and in very adverse weather conditions also it is also going to survive. Okay, now because see, let's say it's an adverse weather condition, let's say the water is already very limited, but because it is going to absorb water in a more efficient manner, so even in highly, let's say, extreme conditions, if the mycorrhiza is present abundantly, the plant is able to survive. Okay, then It also helps to improve the soil itself. That is why when mycorrhiza gets destroyed, even the soil quality gets degraded. So not only do we have a negative impact on the plant, but on the soil also. Okay. It contributes to soil aggregation, stability, okay, and overall improved water retention. Even this gets better, right? Then we see they also help in nutrient cycling, okay, help in overall transfer of nutrients. So that overall helps, even helps in decomposition process. And again, when the decomposition happens, the nutrients will again come back to the soil. So which means a proper cycle is there. So nutrient or ecosystem functioning and proper cycling is maintained. And this also supports other life forms. Okay, so if the plant is functioning well, better photosynthesis, which means other, let's say, elements of food chain, they are also going to be properly taken care of. Okay, so that is also one example that we can quote here in this particular part. All right. Now moving to the other aspect, right here, that the last part, even this, the seedling establishment. Okay, so mycorrhiza, fungus, etc. This also helps in germination. It also helps in establishment of young plants. Okay, overall. So overall, even in the successful germination, because again, when you have a very small seed, the seed will become a seedling, okay, then a sapling, then a bore. This is what we had seen. Okay, so this is an entire part in the cycle that happens. So again, this is overall beneficial. Fine. So that is also another important aspect here, right? So this is one. Other parts that we can say which also helps, and by the way, when we say about stress tolerance, also remember I've also spoken about mycorrhiza induced resistance. Already pathogen is mentioned, but explicitly you can mention how mycorrhiza helps in mycorrhiza induced resistance. Okay, so both for abiotic stress and also biotic stress, mycorrhiza plays an important role in safeguarding the whole plant. Okay, other than that, what other benefits we can derive from mycorrhiza, right? Helps in promotion of biodiversity. Now this point is more or less self-explanatory. Helps in sustainable agriculture. Okay, so now in many cases when the soil is getting degraded, the addition of mycorrhiza, etc. helps. Okay, so it helps or benefits better nutrient uptake, reduces the requirement for fertilizers. Okay, overall plant health is better, leading to more sustainable and productive agriculture practices. This also helps. This also in case will contribute to, because see, carbon sequestration will also happen here, right? Because organic matter will get decomposed, carbon cycling, etc. And now you will notice some of the points you can use for other aspects also. Okay, so something, if the plant is getting proper growth, it will also help in carbon sequestration. So this is a indirect point, right? Then in the restoration efforts also, for example, if we do mycorrhiza inoculation, this will help in the restoration of the ecosystem. Okay, better plant establishment, better soil quality, we have understood this, right? And lastly, the more we study mycorrhiza, it gives us insights into how better to manage the forest soils. Okay, symbiotic relationships, nutrient cycling. So even mycorrhiza biotechnology is again a very important aspect. Okay, where it helps in sustainable agriculture. Okay, even phytoremediation. The word phyto means plant, remediation means how, for example, in bioremediation we can treat the pollutants through the use of a live organism. Okay, whereas phyto means how plants can be used to treat the waste overall. Okay, or the pollutant. Helps in ecological restoration as well. Okay, so this again is an important part that we can understand here, right? So now if you get a question like this, explain the role of mycorrhiza in plant growth and development of forest trees. Again, this is a previous year question. We have discussed enough content which you can write in the exam. Okay, so again, the people who are watching the lecture, especially the people writing the 2024 mains, whatever questions write from the first lecture itself, try to have a habit of putting pen to the paper. I know this is again an aspect of, we don't want to write, we want to delay it as much as possible, but again questions like this will come in your exam. Okay. For example, what is the role of mycorrhiza in plant growth and development for forest trees? Okay. We've already discussed this: drought tolerance, soil structure, aggregation stress tolerance. Okay. So I'm not going to go into detail here. Already all the points we've understood. Okay. Now let us go and discuss specifically, because now if you get a question, again, almost all the points that we have seen through a simple diagram can also be understood, and then we'll see the difference between endo and ecto mycorrhiza. Okay, now let's say you draw a plant, you show the roots. In the roots you can show mycorrhiza. Here you are seeing potassium, sodium. Okay, the uptake of the nutrients is getting better. So here overall sodium potassium uptake better, reduction of osmotic stress. Okay, then balanced water relationship in plants, better water balance, maintaining plant growth and development. Okay, you can even add mycorrhiza induced resistance. Okay, so some of these points that we have just seen you can overall highlight. Okay, other than that, again almost a similar example. 10% of the sugars go to the fungi. P, NPK, water, etc. is well absorbed and taken up. Okay, that is how you can show this diagram overall, right? Now we'll see the difference between endo and ecto. Okay, and when we write the difference, again I would want you to write in the same format. You know what is the basis of difference. Okay, you know what are the basic points, so that in a tabular format it is always easy. It shows your level of clarity also. Fine. Now when we are saying endo, ecto, just we know ecto would mean outside, endo would mean inside. So when I say endo, inside, here remember the hyphae. The hyphae, this is the part of hyphae. This is going to see you have all the root cells here. The hyphae is going to penetrate the root cells, whereas in ectomycorrhiza these are the cells, but the hyphae does not penetrate the root cells. This is the main part of difference. Okay, so we are already seeing the whole cross section of the root cell here. So here two things for you to see, just a second. Yeah, in this cross section, so this part that you see here is the hyphae. This part is going to penetrate the root cells in endomycorrhiza. However, the hyphae does not penetrate in the ectomycorrhiza. Okay, so that is overall one part that you see, right? Now in a simple format, in definition and all the parameter wise, we'll just have a look at. This is again a very important topic, and the points, all these points, try to mention them in your answer. Okay, additionally we will also see when we do paper 1B VAM. Okay, again related to this whole part here, which is the vesicle arbuscular mycorrhiza. That is also one topic that we do. Now ectomycorrhiza, this is endomycorrhiza, right? The very first part is the definition. Ecto is a type of mycorrhiza where the fungal hyphae does not penetrate deep into the plants. So in the cells or the cortical cells, it does not penetrate. That is what we saw. So just in the definition, we are just seeing, we are outlining what we have just seen. Okay, whereas endomycorrhiza is the where the fungal hyphae actually penetrates in deep into the plants. Okay, the fungal hyphae is going to penetrate deep into the plants. The first point of difference. Okay, then one by one there are few things that you have to see. Okay, right from the hyphae mantae, the mantle of the hyphae. So in the ectomycorrhiza we have a hyphae mantle, whereas in the endomycorrhiza you do not have the hyphae mantle. Okay, that's the second point of difference. Third is prevalence. In fact, prevalence and abundance you can club together. Ectomycorrhiza is not much prevalent and it is very less, only around 4%. But endomycorrhiza is more prevalent, highly abundant, at is around 80%. Okay, then the vesicles and the arbuscles are absent in ectomycorrhiza, whereas vesicles and arbuscles are present, which is why we will also see a term known as VAM, VAM, which is vesicles arbuscle mycorrhiza. This is again used in the management of soil. This is again put in the soil for restoration of the soil, right? So sometimes you see that how the soil reclamation, soil fertility overall can be made better, and we saw that how we can have sustainable agriculture through the application of VAM in the soil. VAM is nothing but vesicle, arbuscle, mycorrhiza, and now you understand these vesicles and arbuscles are only present in endomycorrhiza. So that is one thing you have to understand, that yes, VAM, if we are saying, we are talking about this main part here. Now, because we have seen this is a fungus. So if you can remember what is the fungus getting involved here, the fungus that is getting used in ectomycorrhiza is Ascomycota, okay, or Basidomycota, howsoever my pronunciation may not be the best here, okay. The Ascomycota and the Basidomycota is the fungus. So again, let's say we see these are the fungus, okay. In the fungus, what is the name of the fungus? So name of the fungus is Ascomycota and Basidomycota. Here in endomycorrhiza, it is Glomeromycota. The name of the fungus is Glomeromycota. Here it is Ascomycota and Basidomycota, right? And then of course, what is the example? The example here can be pine trees, cedrus. For example, we have Cedrus deodara, okay. We have oak trees, beech trees, pine, for example, Pinus roxburghi, okay. Whereas again we have seen almost 85% of the vascular plants have this endomycorrhiza, including orchids, shrubs, a lot of foliage plants, okay. So this, because this is we're doing in the second lecture itself, and all in 2023 also there was a question. In the previous years there have been question on this, either in 1A or 1B. For of course when you attempt the paper 1A or 1B is going to be almost the same for you. You have to practice this, okay, because you may think, acha, I know, because in the exam even recalling this becomes difficult. So when you attempt this question, one, you have to try to make a diagram like this. You don't have to be very detailed, just show endo and ecto and show the part hyphae penetrating and hyphae not penetrating through the cross section, one. And then here whatever parameters we have seen, try to draw that. If you do this, you will get overall full marks, okay. But of course here this part requires more revision, because you have to remember the name of fungus. You have to know the terms like hyphae, the hyphae mantle, what is vesicle, arbuscle, and of course the spellings may not be very easy if you're writing for the first time. So you have to practice this 2 or 3 times, okay. And in Edaphic, see, one general question is how Edaphic affects overall the forests. Second question that comes is what is mycorrhiza and what are the benefits of mycorrhiza. Third question is what is the difference between endo and ecto. Direct question they ask you, okay. Even can be a 8 marker or even it can be a 10 marker, okay. You have to be very sure about it. Now just for our sake of quick revision, if you have to talk about again the difference, we can talk about difference. Here just remember the keyword, okay. This one can be the fungal colonization around this. So here we have already seen ecto, the hyphae do not penetrate to the root cells but grow between them. The level of fungal colonization, they do not penetrate in ecto, yes. In endomycorrhiza, we have seen that the fungal hyphae forms X structures and it actually penetrates into the root cells, okay. So fungal colonization is clear to us. Root structure, here if we also have a look at, okay. So here for example the fungal sheath here etc surrounds the root tips and the lateral roots, and there is a distinct interference between the mantle and the plant, okay. This is what is seen in ectomycorrhiza, whereas when you go for endomycorrhiza, we have seen arbuscles that are present, okay. So the root cells, they contain fungal structures, these are the arbuscles, okay. Very specialized branches of this will penetrate. This is nothing what we have seen in the diagram, okay. So this particular parts that will actually penetrate, these you have proper arbuscles that are present, okay, and this will have a more direct interaction, because here in ecto the interaction was not there. Here there is a more intimate direct interaction between the fungus and the plant, okay. Nutrient exchange also. So in the ectomycorrhiza, it actually will happen in the extracellular spaces, which is here. Ectomycorrhiza, this is the cell. Outside the cell, these are the extracellular spaces. This is where the nutrient exchange is going to happen, okay, right. Whereas in endomycorrhiza, directly this will happen with the plant cell, because it has already penetrated overall, where exactly the arbuscle is going to be present. Fine. The hosts that we overall talk about, if you can remember this, excellent. But other than that, I think this part is more important, the fungal taxonomy, okay. Ascomycota and this Basidomycota. Whereas in endomycorrhiza, we had seen the Globermycota, the Globermycota, okay. Again, not very sure about the exact pronunciation here, but this is what you can overall go through. Fine. The differences either you can mention in this part or this part, whatever comes easy, you are able to remember. That is what is needed overall. Fine. So that is one part that you will have a look at. Fine. Another part that we'll again have a look at is biofertilizers. Fine. Now talking of biofertilizers, even in this year, I had shown you the paper, we had a question of biofertilizers, although that was asked in paper 1B, okay. But still, because we are doing the topic, let us, for the sake of continuation also, we should do. So when you write about biofertilizers, you can talk about azospirillum, rhizobium, we have already seen, this was the bacteria. Another prominent one that you also read is Anabina, this Anabina azole, okay. Mycorrhiza fungus, Pseudomonas, okay. So now for biofertilizers, let us just cover it once, okay. So just give me a second here, we'll try to just structure it overall. Okay, so for when we're doing the this part, so I can club this in 4 parts, okay. So first is just one line you can write down for biofertilizers. These are the natural fertilizers that contain live organisms. These are the natural fertilizers that contain live organisms. When applied to seeds, comma, plant surfaces or soil. When applied to seeds, plant surfaces or soil, they promote the soil growth. They promote the soil growth by increasing the supply or availability, of nutrients to the plants. Okay, this part we are clear about. So again, we had seen that we can structure biofertilizer in this manner, okay. What are the microorganisms that are available, okay. So here again, either you can mention it in terms of the symbiotic. For example, in symbiotic we can talk about rhizobium. This is again a bacteria. We can talk about mycorrhiza, which is again a fungus. We can also talk about like the ones which we had seen, Pseudomonas, okay. We can talk about Anabina. Okay, so here just one line each you can write down. For rhizobium, just write down rhizobium dash. It is used for legumes and helps in nitrogen fixation. 2 keywords. In prelims has been asked. N2 fixation used in legumes, okay. this is symbiotic. In case you also want to write down the free living, let me also write that example. Let me write it here. The free living, which means they do not have a symbiotic association. A good example can be Azobacter or this Azotobacter. Okay, Azotobacter and Azospirillum. Azobacter and Azospirillum. Okay. Other than that, there is also an example of this BGA. BGA is your blue-green algae. Okay. The Azolla, etc., that is there in the ferns is the example of a blue-green algae. These are the microorganisms. The heading for this topic is overall biofertilizer. The definition I've already dictated. Okay, these are the microorganisms. Second thing overall we'll have a look at is the advantages. Okay, now very first thing, these are first of all alternatives to your chemical fertilizers, eco-friendly, help in soil. For soil, of course, they will help in soil health, soil structure, help in overall nutrient uptake. So whatever points good that we have seen for mycorrhiza in general, you can borrow and write overall for advantages. For mycorrhiza, we've seen more than 10 benefits that they give. Okay, so you can even talk about this in this particular part here. Okay, but if you want to write even more specific points, I can tell you 2 or 3 points that you can write here. Okay, one specific point is they help in of course nitrogen fixation. Okay, second point, they help in phosphorus stabilization. Okay, other than that, they also help in growth promotion. Now when you're writing about the growth promotion, there are a couple of things you can write down. So this helps in production of plant growth hormones. Now when we say the plant growth hormones, we can give examples of auxins. Okay, auxins and gibberellins. The spelling for gibberellin, G-I-B-B-E-R-E-L-L-I-N-S. Auxins and gibberellins. This is also what we can write down. Okay, so of course it is a good eco-friendly alternative. Additional point you can also write down, this is cost effective. Okay, so with this content you will be able to overall write a very fair decent answer. Important for environment sustainability, helpful in sustainable agriculture, promotes soil fertility. This I think we've already written. For soil you can also write down the fertility aspect here, along with the examples that have to be there in your answer. Okay, this is all you have to do for biofertilizer. So biofertilizer is also something that we have covered. Okay, for Azolla in this part, if you want to write just one line, you can write Azolla is Azolla combined with Azolla, A-Z-O-L-L-A. Azolla is actually a water fern. Azolla is a water fern combined with blue-green algae, BGA. Azolla combined with blue-green algae is used in paddy fields. It is used in paddy fields for improving the nutrient uptake. It is used in the paddy fields for improving the nutrient uptake. Okay, so that is also what we can explain and write here. Fine. So this also will help you understand overall aspect of biofertilizers. Then, like we have seen, light is available to the plant. In the presence of light, overall we know a very important part of photosynthesis has to happen. Okay, the carbon dioxide cycle and how this helps in carbon dioxide sequestration, water. And you should, whenever you write photosynthesis, you can write, okay, in the presence of sunlight. What are the nutrients? What are the macronutrients? So macronutrients basically are this: phosphorus, remember with phosphorus, mycorrhiza also, okay, biofertilizers, calcium, magnesium, sulfur, and you have a lot of micronutrients including boron, copper, iron, chloride, magnesium, okay, molybdenum, zinc, etc. So this is also one thing that we can overall mention here, okay. So that is also one part that you can talk about, okay. Similar way, again these are again ways to present your answer. Macro and micro, again overall you can mention how this overall helps. I think this will also help you, okay. So now this particular topic, I'm very sure you have a very good understanding. Effect of these edaphic or the soil based factors on vegetation, and not just this, but we've also covered other factors like mycorrhiza, overall biofertilizers, because 2 to 3 questions will be asked from this topic itself, okay. So you can be prepared about it, right? Now if you see whatever I had told and spoken to you, overall you can mention it in this manner, okay. For example, if we have done the edaphic, the soil structure, overall soil temperature part, the chemical, that is the pH, biological, the microorganisms, etc., right? So microorganism we have also done, so that is one part that we have overall seen, okay. Now let us also have a look at the topographical factors, right? Now topographical factors will include how the configuration of the land surface is, and again one by one, and here also we'll see a lot of diagrams, especially when there's a altitudinal zonation of forest, etc. We'll also see how this affects. So in topography, one is configuration of land surface, okay. We will see how altitude is going to determine, okay. Similarly with latitude, we'll also have a look at how the slope is and how the slope is going to impact this whole part here. And finally the aspect, okay, even aspect is going to be an important part. So one by one we'll have a look at, and here also diagrams are going to be very, very much useful for us, so we will keep an overall look at it, okay. So one by one we will understand this part here. Now for example, if you see this, and this is again one of the most common parts that you will have a look at, okay. When we go from, and this is how the altitude is changing, and similar example we'll also see in the case of latitudes, okay. And that is why latitude and altitudinal zonation is very important. So one by one we will have a look at that, right? Now right from, let's say, the 0 meter, as we move along 1000 meters, 2000, 3000, 4000, you will see that there is a change that is happening. So from the equator, if you overall have a look at, and again as you move up the altitude, as you move up the height, tropical, subtropical, temperate, subalpine, alpine, we have seen all the 5 groups yesterday also in the Champion and Saith classification, okay. So this is also seen altitudinally, okay. Now if you have a look at here, let's say this is how the mountain is, okay. You have tropical rainforest, you have temperate deciduous forest as we move up the slope, needle leaf, tundra region. So there is a change in the zonation of forest here, okay. Now what happens as you move upwards, okay. By the way, here also you would have heard terms like the lapse rate or the normal lapse rate. So for example, there is a decrease in temperature the moment you go up. Similarly, the pressure also decreases. Rainfall and soil fertility, this will decrease as we move up the altitude, okay. However, the wind velocity and the solar radiation happens to increase as you move up. Okay, solar radiation is increasing, whereas the wind velocity is also increasing up. Okay, that is one part. Just keep this here, understand this for a moment. Now this is again a very important diagram. Okay, in fact, if you can, after the lecture also, you have to pause it and you have to write. In fact, I'll also make you write down some important species here. But this is, for example, the tropical, subtropical. This is the warm temperature. You go to a cool, subalpine, alpine, and finally snow. Okay, so for example, in this subtropical part, you can have a look at sal. As you move up, subtropical pine forest includes chair pine. Okay, the temperate broadleaf can include oak, rhododendron. Again, when you think about Himachal in all this, it's again very important. Rhododendron, Himalayan maple. When we think about the coniferous forests, other, for example, the fir, spruce, larch, hemlock. Okay, as we are moving up, and again in the meadows on these top areas, the alpine areas, we see herbaceous plants, again rhododendrons. So as we move up, we see an overall change in how this whole part is going to be arranged. Okay, so this again happens to be a very important part. Okay, so here just 2 or 3 lines you can write down. Okay, for altitude, some of the species I want you to note down. We are just writing only few. So first you can write down at lower altitudes. So roughly around, we are talking about around 1500 meters at lower altitudes, right? We have subtropical forest species like, just we saw, chair pine, okay, at lower altitudes up to 1500 meter, subtropical forests with species like chair pine, Pinus roxburghi. Okay, then that is the first part. Now from between 1500 to 3000 meters, temperate forests with rhododendron, oak, okay, here for this you can write down, this is Quercus, semicarpifolia, oak is Quercus, semicarpifolia. So 2 examples here, rhododendron and oak, when we're talking of the 1500 to 3000 range. And when we move even up, like we have seen here in the even upward regions, then you can write down above 3000 meters, subalpine and alpine. Above 3000 meters, subalpine and alpine. Okay, so here 2 examples, one is juniper and one is birch. Okay, juniper and birch. For juniper, we can write this as Juniperus species. For species, we write SPP. Okay. And then you have birch. Birch is Betula utilis. Betula utilis. These are some prominent examples as we move up the altitude. Okay, So that is the vegetation zonation in the Himalayan region, for example. A similar thing is what we see latitude wise. Okay, for this you can draw this diagram and this diagram side by side. Okay, how latitudinal zonation happens and how altitudinal zonation happens. Okay, from equator to the poles, tropical, grassland, deciduous, coniferous, etc., tree line, and then the tundra part. And similar part if you see here in the altitudes, right? And by the way, you will see a slanting line, which means it is not at the equal length. Okay, so that means the line, don't draw it like this, draw it in this manner. Okay, so here when you see, because there is a difference in height, for example, if you see this image also, this is 14,500 feet and this is 13,000. You don't have to remember this exactly, but if you draw like this is a more accurate representation. Right from snow to tundra, coniferous, deciduous, grassland, tropical. This is also one diagram you can practice, because almost every year you will find either a question on, or almost 1 or 2 questions on this part you will get. Okay, altitudinal zonation, tropical, grassland, deciduous, coniferous, snow, tundra. So this is again one thing we can draw overall and mention. Okay, so this part of this you can overall write down. Okay, now similar thing, we'll also have a look at the slope. Okay, so slope, if you have a very steep slope, fine, there will be more runoff, the vegetation may not be very good, and that is why it is said, especially when we have a very steep slope, cultivation or vegetation, etc., these or agriculture should not be practiced, because these areas would be more prone to landslides. And already we have seen in the Himalayan region, for example, very much prone to landslides. Okay, so even slope is going to be important. Now here a very diagram like this you can draw. You can show this part, you can show water coming in and wind coming in. Okay, there will be evaporation and transpiration. Sometimes we combine this, we say evapotranspiration. Okay, this is the whole soil medium. As the water moves in, there is going to be infiltration, the root will also take something up, and there will be runoff. So based on the kind of slope that is there, even here the vegetation is going to be impacted. So slope is also an important determinant. Okay, that is why the slope stability is again an important part in this whole discussion. Okay, that slope stability also plays a very important part here in the discussion overall. Fine. For this also, let me also make you write down a particular part so that you can even note that down. Just a second. So here you can just write down, and here we are combining. Okay, in the slope also, just you can write, steeper slopes lead to increased runoff. Steeper slopes lead to increased runoff and reduced moisture retention. Reduced moisture retention affecting vegetation. Affecting vegetation. Now when I was talking to you, let's say this is Western Ghats. This part is the windward side. If you think about the southwest monsoon, the incoming winds, these are heavy moisture laden winds. There will be a lot of rainfall here. Okay, this is the windward side of Western Ghats, this is the leeward side of Western Ghats. So on the windward side you will have more dense vegetation, whereas on the leeward side it will be very scarce vegetation, because very less rainfall is going to happen in this region. Okay, so this is also how we can talk about what is going to happen in this whole part. That is one part that we can overall mention. Okay, so this also is an important factor that overall plays an important role. Okay, a couple of points extra that I want you to also note down with this. So write down on gentle slopes, on gentler slopes, or we can say as on the valley bottoms, okay, on gentler slopes or valley bottoms. Here what will happen, the water will tend to accumulate. For example, here there will be a lot of water accumulated on the valley bottoms, okay. Here you will find trees with high water demands, okay. On the valley bottoms you will find trees with high water demands. So you can mention that like trees with high water demands like bamboo, sal, that is Shorea robusta, are common at valley bottoms which have gentler slopes. And in contrast, in steep slopes you have the trees which have very low water demands, okay. So here you can write down, you will find drought resistant species. Drought resistant species will be found more in the steep slopes. For example, you can give example of acacia or even pine species. These will be drought resistant species, okay, because on these steep slopes we already have a rapid water runoff, okay. So that is one thing we can talk about. Another aspect is, or another point is aspect. In aspect, what you can write down, okay, so aspect, first of all you should know what it is, and this diagram directly tells you. So for example, this is a overall mountain, okay. The side that is facing the sun, or we can say the sun facing slope, this is the side that is facing. That is why if you see the diagram, you have abundance of vegetation here but very limited vegetation here. So even aspect is also an important part that plays a role here in this particular part, okay. So here you can just write the aspect, or which means the direction of the slope, also affects the vegetation. Direction of the slope also affects the vegetation. South facing slopes in the northern hemisphere, the south facing slopes in the northern hemisphere receive more sunlight. South facing slopes in the northern hemisphere receive more sunlight. They receive more sunlight, which leads to more vegetation overall in the region. And for aspect, we've already seen the example of this windward side and leeward side. And this example you can give, for example, in the Western Ghats also, the windward side has abundant vegetation, including the evergreen trees, the tropical evergreen forests, whereas the leeward side does not. Okay, so this is what you can talk about. Okay. Before we end this, just one more example or part I'll tell you, because we are giving example of Western Ghats also. So please write. In the Western Ghats, the steep slopes are dominated by the steep slopes are dominated by acacia or hardy species like acacia. Hardy species like acacia, and the lower slopes or valleys, they support diverse and water loving species. Diverse and water loving species like teak, Tectona grandis, okay, even bamboo. So here also we have seen certain important examples along with the parts that you understand here. Okay. So Edaphic also we have seen. We've also seen the topographic. We also see that topographic was also known as physiographic part here. Okay. So how is the land, or how is the configuration of the overall land surface, right? So here, whether the terrain, for example, or I can even mention that here also, I think I did not write about. Okay. Configuration of the land surface. So here again, right from the kind of soil that is there, how rugged overall the terrain is, okay, which means again the presence of already, let's say, different deposits or minerals, etc. Because the configuration of this land surface overall is also going to determine how much vegetation is in rugged areas, etc., where already, let's say, the water availability is less. These are very harsh harsh conditions. So here, because of harsh conditions, etc., you will not feel enough vegetation. Okay. So configuration of the land surface also, altitude, latitude, slope, and aspect. These are important aspects which are related to topographic part. Okay. Now let us also have a look at the climatic aspects here. Okay. So let's say if I talk about the solar radiation. Okay. And again, climatic is again very easy to understand. Okay. Maybe we don't, if we are not able to cover all the aspect here because another class has to start. So I'll just go through some of the aspects. The remaining parts will also cover in the upcoming class, right? So here, for example, when we're talking about solar radiation, okay, so solar radiation, the abundance of solar radiation is important, okay, because solar radiation is going to impact photosynthesis, transpiration, evaporation, and this in effect is also going to be related to at what time, for example, the stomata is going to open or close, right? This will also impact the availability of nutrients, the exchange of water. So solar radiation has to be an important part overall, right? So again here, if we see overall, availability of solar radiation is an important factor. This will, how the forest canopy, etc., is there, how much radiation is going to be taken in, is going to be a factor here. So here also some important aspects will be overall important. Now, for example, if we talk about overall climate, in climate we know that we will talk about temperature, moisture, solar radiation, and winds. And whenever we say climate, we have in the previous class also seen that the forest influences its microclimate also. Okay. And second, the climate also impacts how much vegetation is going to be present here, right? So if you see, this is again a schematic overall telling us that what change have happened over a period of time. Okay. Now remember, these forests are a very good carbon sink. So when deforestation will happen, the stored carbon is going to be accumulated, is going to be released, okay, which is going to be a problem. So from 2000 to 2015, if you look at, this is, let's say, the old whole Amazon forest, okay, it was controlling the microclimate. Now slowly and steadily deforestation started to happen, right? So here more solar radiation, so cumulative loss of 2.6 billion tons of carbon, that is what deforestation is doing. More and more agricultural aspects, so slowly you will see the forests getting reduced. This is again overall telling you what is happening, okay. In fact, there is more and more of forest fires, okay. In fact, changes in the solar radiation, amount of solar radiation will also affect the phenology, remember, okay. So that is also an important factor here. So again, overall, when you understand this, you will see limited forest available. This also you can club it to the previous knowledge that we saw, okay. Now coming, and this is again the incoming radiation is there. Some of this is getting reflected via clouds. There is a thermal radiation coming in, okay. Now the quality of this is also important when we say light, okay, or the incoming UV rays, not everything is getting used up, or very small fraction is taken up by the plants, which is photosynthetically active radiation. So in solar radiation, only the PAR, that is the photosynthetically active radiation, is the one that is important for the growth of the plants, okay, or the trees here. Some of this is getting reflected, plus photosynthesis is going on, right? Maybe some water loss, evapotranspiration, a wind radiation is also happening. Now this is again, you may not be able to draw all the aspect here, but this also shows how solar radiation is coming in and how it is getting diffused or overall used in this particular part, okay? So if you have a look here, you will also understand that overall the various aspects, okay, related to this part, right? So I hope this part is also you are able to understand. Okay, we will also see other some aspects here. Now same part when we see light, okay. Now what is the impact of light on plants? And again we'll see the impact of light also keeps on changing. The light is not going to be constant. The quality of light is also going to change, okay. Plus there is also a term that is known as photoperiod. We have already seen a term that is known as phenology. First of all, let me tell you what is a photoperiod, okay. Photoperiod is the entire time or the duration for which the sunlight is available, okay. It is the duration for the time when the sunlight is available, okay. Now again, for example, when we have a red light, okay, it influences the plant growth. Why? Because phytochrome is present, it gets activated. This also helps, okay. When exposed to this red light, it triggers the elongation in the plant stems, helping them to reach towards these light sources. This is again one of the vital adaptation mechanisms, okay. Now here, if when we talk about the light even, so there are different kinds of plants that are going to be present, okay, when we are talking of light, okay. So you have, for example, long day plants, we have short day plants, okay, and we also have neutral plants or day neutral plants, okay. Long day plants would require around 12 hours or more, so they are requiring a very long photoperiod, okay. Whereas the short day plants would also work in a short photoperiod, right. So there are different kinds of plants, right, depending on what the photoperiod is. That is also a very important factor. Long day plants, short day plants, and day neutral plants, which are not very much impacted by how long the photoperiod is. But remember, there's a day long and short day plants, which are also important for us to understand, okay. This is how also the light is going to be an important part here, okay. So that is one. Second part that we'll also have a look at in this particular part, okay, is, for example, the quality, okay. You have the UV rays, okay. Again, this we also see during the fall a redder light, during the summer a bluer light, IR, the infrared, etc. in the spring. How that impacts the growth prospects is also one part overall. Fine. So in this, remember the effect of light, okay. The light can impact the quality, the duration, and the intensity, okay. The quality is also important. For how long? So that means again, right, and the intensity. All the three components are going to be important here for our understanding, all right. So that is also an important part that you need to know, okay. Next, we also have a look. In fact, first of all, I'll tell you this part here, then we'll go back to the part, what is the part determined temperature. Now, here you see there are terms like, you have light demander, we have shade bearer, and shade demander. I had used these terms previously also. First of all, let us understand this. We'll also then understand what are the factors which influence the temperature, and then we'll also go back to some other parts here, okay. Because again, this is a very interesting topic, so we'll see this in proper understanding. Now this is one part you have to have in your notes, you have to take it down. Okay, when I share this with you, you can also go through this. I'll also again speak it out. For example, tropical wet evergreen is the forest type. Okay, the light demander species can be Dipterocarpus, okay, or even Calophyllum species. These are light demanders. Okay, shade bearers can be here Artocarpus species. Shade demander which will demand shade is going to be Mesoferia, okay, or Palaquim. Mesoferia is relatively easy to understand. We'll see this maybe in coming classes also. So for now, in tropical wet evergreen type of forest, there is a light demander, there is a shade bearer, there is a shade demander. Okay, Dipterocarpus, Artocarpus, and Mesoferia. Okay, so if you remember the dam, or maybe through this, we have our own ways to remember. Dipterocarpus, Artocarpus, Mesoferia. Okay, tropical moist deciduous forest. Now Shorea robusta, you have sal. These are again important timber species for tea cultivation, etc. You have Bombax siva, okay, Adena cordifolia. Again, when we talk about different lectures, we'll see them many a times. Okay. By the way, this is also mentioned in our syllabus. Gymnelina, this arborea. By the way, this was asked in the year, if I'm not wrong, 2022 or 2021. Okay, I think 2021 this was asked. Then you have Pterocarpus marsupium. This is a shade bearer. Okay, Xylea xylocarpa, or jamun that we eat, that is Syzygium cumini. Okay, which is again the wonder fruit. For example, in the west or in some areas you have the blueberries. Okay, for us even jamun is equally nutritional. That is Syzygium cumini. Here you have this Gymnelina arborea, Pterocarpus marsupium. This is with respect to the tropical moist deciduous. Okay, then montane subtropical we just had a look at. One is Pinus roxburghi. Okay, there is also a Quercus species. We had seen just a Quercus species of oak. So there are many other varieties. If you do not remember, you can just write them as Quercus spp. Okay, whereas this one is the Quercus leucotrichophora. Okay, Quercus leucotrichophora. And then rhododendron that we have seen, rhododendron happens to be a shade demander. Okay, it will flourish in the presence of shade. Okay, as we move up, montane temperate species, another Pinus species is there. Populus, we'll also see Populus deltoid. This is Populus ciliata. Okay, so Pinus vallicania is one. Quercus, again another oak species. Okay, this is Quercus himalayana, which is again we can remember it from Himalaya. Cedrus deodara, from Deodara you can think this is Deodar. Okay, again present in higher altitudes. Followed by, again yesterday we also spoken about AB spindro. Maybe you do not remember Taxus baccata, you can remember AB spindro. Okay, so while from here you will know this is again a part you have to again go through multiple times, and after again we'll see some of the zonation. I'll also try to help you with some mnemonics. We'll try to remember this, but maybe in the initial part you may feel this, you are seeing a lot of species in one go. Okay, but no issues, we'll have a look at them. So when we see tropical wet evergreen, so we have seen one of the example of light demander beans, Dipterocarpus species. Okay, Artocarpus species, Mesoferia. Okay, in tropical moist deciduous, Shorea robusta, Adena cartifolia, Bombax siva, Pterocarpus marsupium, Gymnelina arborea. These are shade bearer. So here also, like you have seen them, also draw it in a proper manner so that you are able to cover this comprehensively. Similarly, for example, Xylea xylocarpa, okay, Syzygium cumini, montane subtropical Pinus roxburghi, Quercus species, rhododendron species in the similar order. Followed by, in the last, for example, you have the montane temperate, okay, Pinus vallicania, Populus ciliata, okay, Quercus species, Cedrus deodara, and last is AB spindro. Okay, so slowly and steadily, for example, some of the species have gotten repeated from the last class also. So now you have to try to put them in different forest types. Okay, So this is how you understand the light demander, shade demander, and the shade bearer species. Okay, that is one example. Okay. Other than that, this is again a question that has been repeated. What are the factors that determine the temperature? Now the temperature is going to be, for example, we say altitude will also determine temperature. We have seen as we move up the height, the temperature, pressure will decrease. Even latitude will determine temperature. At equator, direct sunlight. As you move up, temperate regions, okay, to the poles, the temperature changes. Distance from the sea, okay. So here also, in geography, we read about the continentality, okay. So the places which are very close to the sea, there is a moderating effect of the sea breeze. However, if something is very far away, so there is no such moderating effect. That is why they will have extremes of temperature, okay. The presence of winds will also determine how the temperature is going to be, right? Mountains, okay. So mountains part we have just had a look at, okay, how the wind bearing or the windward or the leeward part was there, okay. Similarly, the presence of clouds, this will also determine, okay, cloudless and cloudy sky, this will also have a bearing on the temperature. And lastly also, if vegetation, if there is a barren land, etc., this will not have enough clouds and which will not lead to enough precipitation, so the temperature is going to be different. Whereas if the area is abundant in vegetation, then the temperature will be different, okay. And for all these points you can corroborate, okay, with examples. In all these areas you can mention points along with the examples, so that you can exactly mention and exactly talk about what are the important parts. Fine. So that is also one important part that we understand, right? Now overall we will just take this apart here. Effect of global warming on forest, and overall, can climate change the phenology, okay? Because then the other part of frost, etc., I'll talk about in the upcoming part here. Frost and even wind is remaining, and even drought and other physiological aspects. Fine. So when we say the impact of global warming on forest, which is again linked to the climatic factors, right? So there are a couple of facts that you can mention or remember. For example, when we quote the IPCC Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, okay, so it has highlighted how the carbon dioxide levels are increasing, have surpassed even 400 ppm, okay. IPCC and even World Meteorological Organization have highlighted, for example, from 1850s to almost right now, there is almost a 1.1 degree Celsius increase, okay. The increase of these greenhouse gases, which includes both carbon dioxide, methane, even the nitrous oxides, overall, the increase of the greenhouse gases has led to overall pronounced global warming, okay. And few of the direct consequences that we see, because of the rise in temperature, there is more dry conditions that will happen. There is going to be more desertification that we see, okay. So this will mean, because of this, the forest will be prone to more forest fires, okay. Even if we take the example of Spain or Australia, the bush fires in Spain and Australia, one of the reasons that can contribute to this is also the increasing temperature. So that is one, okay. Second, again with global warming and overall the aspects, there is an increase of extreme weather events, okay. So when we say overall related to global warming here, just a second. So one part directly which supports is the increasing greenhouse gases, okay. Second, for example, we know 2023 being the warmest year on record. Club this with El Nino, okay, which means more extreme weather events, which means both droughts and floods had increased. And not just that, we had already seen increasing forest fires. Fine. So this is also one thing that happens, that when the temperature is increasing, leading to more drier conditions. in more dry conditions, especially when we talk of, let's say, conifers, pines, etc., they are rich in resins and very much probable to catch fires. Okay, so that is also one of the reasons. In addition to this, the cycle for monsoons will also change. Okay, and another related part here is, which is also a question that has been asked by the Indian Forest Services: can climate change the period of phenology? Okay, so here we know what is phenology. It is, again, overall, think about this in terms of seasons. At what time the flowering should happen, at what time the fruiting should happen. Okay, so can climate change the period? So yes, we have a lot of evidences to support this, which support that yes, it can happen. Okay, which we have seen in changing of the period of monsoons, for example. For certain plants and crops, the seasons have become shorter. Okay, the culmination of El Nino has led to pronounced, for example, drought-like conditions, which has also been a case in point. So that is also something we can highlight here. Okay, so overall, there are a lot of evidences to support that yes, climate change can change the period of phenology. For this, a couple of points that you can write down. Overall, so here the first part you can write down: warmer temperatures lead to earlier blooming. Warmer temperatures leads to earlier blooming. Okay, which affects the phenology of plants, which means the fruiting or the flowering or the leaf unfolding of plants will be done earlier. That's the first part. Okay, the example of this is that springtime had been observed earlier in many parts of the world. Okay, so when we talk about spring season, this got advanced. Even in many cases, even the monsoons got disturbed. So that is one. Second, we can write down altered precipitation patterns. So one is related to the warmer temperatures. Second is altered rainfall or precipitation, or you can write down erratic rainfall. Also influences the phenology of plants. Right, so right from the growth of plant. Okay, so overall plant growth, flowering, fruiting is also impacted because of altered precipitation. And the third point is extended growing seasons. The third part here is there are extended growing seasons. Okay, so for this you can also write down warmer temperatures may lead to extending the growing seasons. Warmer temperatures can also lead to extending of the growing seasons, leading to prolonged leaf retention. Leading to prolonged leaf retention. And when I'm talking of leaf retention, we can think about the deciduous forest or the plants. Okay, so especially in warmer temperatures and in a specific season of time, they have to shed their leaves. So now if the growing season is prolonged, the leaf retention would also be longer, affecting the overall cycle of how the flowers would come in when the fruiting would have to happen, which will lead to even more changes. Okay, so we will continue from here in the next one. So we'll also see this, some other dimensions of global warming on climate change. And then of course, for example, we'll see how the species composition and ecosystem function is impacted. And then we'll also have a look at frost, the injuries related to frost, the damage, frost resistance, etc. Okay, different frost species. Okay, snow. So again, we'll have a look at the climatic aspects. Okay, terms like hardening of other biotic factors. Okay, so before we end, there are a few questions that you can have a look at and try to attempt. What is the difference between ecto mycorrhiza and endo mycorrhiza? That can be the first question. Second question, explain the role of mycorrhiza in plant growth and development of forest trees. Discuss in detail the kind of mycorrhiza and the benefits derived by the plant from them. You can also write a question on biofertilizers. This was already asked in the Indian Forest exam of 2023. Okay. So this is one. How are the forests classified in India? We've already done. We've done the Champion and Seth classification of 1968. This is something we've done. This you can also try to attempt. Forests substantially check soil erosion. We've already covered the Edaphic factors. So try to now have, you will have some points here. In fact, this we will again cover soil and soil temperature when we do paper 1B. Okay, in forest soils we'll cover this in more detail. Okay, so students who are attempting the questions, you can send in your answers to this number. I'll be having a look at. Okay. Right, so this is what we have to, what I had to say, and overall, those of you who are going to give the exam for Indian Forest Services for 20 to 24, just again the announcement that the Forestry Optional Crash Course has started from the 3rd of October. We are going to cover the Forestry Optional in the next 40 days. So those of you who are going to prepare, you can avail it. You can come to the office from Monday. The classes will start today, and day before we have the live. We had live classes on YouTube. You may have a look at. So we'll be rapidly covering the entire syllabus. Okay. And we also have a test series of Forestry Optional starting from the 12th of October. In case you are interested in this, you can also reach out. Okay. And for any other assistance related to Indian Forest Services or Forestry Optional, you can also contact me on this number, or you can reach out to the office in Delhi offline as well as the online mode. Okay. So with that, we will end this class today. Hopefully we'll meet very soon on Monday. Okay. All the very best.